I need to fix that. Oh well. Hi, my name is Micah Hunter. I'm the Glacier Chorale Director with the Glacier Symphony. Part of my job every year is preparing the Glacier Chorale for annual performances of Handel's Messiah. And I'm glad to hear you're planning on attending that. It's a wonderful, wonderful performance of a great, great work. The Messiah is called an oratorio, which is very much like an opera, except for two things. It usually deals with sacred subject matter, and it's usually not acted out on stage. But there are characters, there is a plot, there's a story, and musically is very similar to an opera. Messiah is the most well-known oratorio in history. Tells the story of Christ from way back in the Old Testament all the way up through the book of Revelation. And it uses primarily the text from the King James Bible as well as the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. Handel wrote Messiah over the course of just 3 weeks at the end of 1741. It's kind of funny. It was actually a desperation work of his because he had racked up massive amounts of debt in London, and he was even threatened with debtor's prison if he didn't come up with the money. Well, he was commissioned to write this work in Dublin, Ireland, and so that's where he went, and he slaved away in his room for 3 weeks, very often refusing food and drink while he worked, and came up with one of the most iconic masterpieces in the world. It was premiered actually in 1742. We think of this as a Christmas work, but it's actually meant to be performed around Easter. But it's often performed around Christmas now, and it's rarely performed in its entirety, I think partially for that reason. But it's a wonderful story. It became his most well-known work. It got him out of debt and then some. It actually made him a very rich man. Even during his life, it became his most well-known work and was performed many, many times. In fact, he did so well with it, he even was able to, during his life, use the proceeds of many performances for charity. He was well known for adapting the work to various artists, various soloists, various ensembles, and so there are many different versions that he himself had his hand in writing. And so that's why when you go to various performances of Messiah, sometimes you'll hear an alto do this solo, and the next time you'll hear a bass do it. Sometimes you hear this performed as a solo, sometimes you hear this performed as a duet. All of that was okay with Handel, and he wrote multiple versions so that you could do things like that. But if this is your first time attending a formal, quote-unquote, classical music performance, a few things to be aware of. First of all, it's normal not to clap after every single song. In a multi-movement work like this, those individual songs are called movements, and usually the idea is to move continuously from one to the next, and not to applaud until the conductor's arms, fully come down, and maybe he even turns to face the audience. And usually that'll happen at a major section break or at the halfway time, right before intermission. One interesting tradition with Messiah is you'll notice the famous Hallelujah chorus. You may notice everyone around you all of a sudden stands up for that. And there's an interesting story as to the history of that. The story goes that the first time that the King of England attended a London performance of Messiah, he was so inspired by the opening strains of this number that he himself stood up. And then everyone else in the audience, noticing the king had stood, also stood out of respect. And so it's a tradition to this day to stand at a live performance of the Hallelujah chorus. Another thing you may notice, and this happens sometimes and not others, sometimes the audience is invited to sing along with the Hallelujah chorus. And while normally in most situations that would be a little bit inappropriate, if you're invited, please feel free. Some people even bring their scores because they want to sing along with parts. So it's a great work to introduce yourself to the world of live classical music performance. It's absolutely thrilling to be there in person, and I hope you enjoy it.